One day, after weeks of tension, Chinedu apologized to Yemisi, hoping to make things right. And just like that, the next time he went hunting, his traps were full again. The forest seemed alive with animals, and Chinedu couldn't ignore the strange connection anymore. It was as if Yemisi had the power to control his fate. The thought made him uneasy, but he kept it to himself, unsure of what to do. Meanwhile, in the palace, the queen had also heard the rumors about her husband's affair with Yemisi. It was no secret that the king had been acting strangely ever since Yemisi started visiting. The queen confronted the king, demanding to know if the rumors were true. She asked him directly if he had been saying Yemisi in secret. The king, not wanting to admit the truth, denied everything. He told the queen that there was nothing between him and Yemisi, that people were simply spreading rumors to cause trouble. He insisted that Yemisi was just a villager and that there was no reason for the queen to worry. But the queen wasn't convinced. She had seen the way the king looked at Yemisi and knew there was more to the story than he was admitting. Despite the king's denial, the rumors continued to spread. The village was buzzing with gossip, and both the king and Chinedu were caught in the middle of it. Yemisi's influence over both men were growing, and everyone could see it. The once peaceful village was now divided by suspicion, lies, and fear. One afternoon, the queen, unable to tolerate the rumors any longer, decided to visit Chinedu. She had heard enough whispers about Yemisi's involvement with the king and knew she needed to confront the situation directly. Arriving at Chinedu's house, the queen spoke in a firm voice, demanding that Chinedu warn Yemisi to stay away from her husband. She was tired of the rumors, tired of the lies, and she would not let Yemisi ruin her marriage. Yemisi, who had been nearby, overheard the conversation from the other room. She listened quietly as the queen issued her warning, a cold smile creeping across her face. She did not react or confront the queen at that moment, but in her mind, plans were already forming. She would not allow anyone, not even the queen, to stand in her way. A few days later, tragedy struck the palace. The queen, who had been healthy and strong, suddenly slumped to the ground while in her chambers. Her servant rushed to her side, but it was too late. She died quickly and without explanation. The village was shocked. Whispers filled the air once again, and many began to suspect that Yemisi had something to do with the queen's sudden death. But no one dared to speak it aloud. A few weeks after the queen's death, the king gathered his closest advisors and kingsmen. In a surprising announcement, he declared that he planned to marry Yemisi. The news sent shockwaves through the village. Everyone knew that the king had only recently lost his queen, and for him to marry so soon, and to Yemisi of all people, was unthinkable. Yet, despite the surprise, no one dared to question the king's decision. His word was law, and no one had the courage to challenge him, not even his closest advisors. When Chinedu heard the news, he was filled with rage and confusion. He couldn't believe that Yemisi, the woman he had brought into his home, was now set to marry the king. The thought of losing her to the king was unbearable, and so, filled with anger, he confronted her. He demanded answers, asking her how he should betray him like this. Yemisi, as always, remained calm. She told Chinedu not to worry, that everything was part of her plan. She asked Chinedu if he wasn't interested in something greater, something more powerful than what he had now. Chinedu, still angry but curious, asked her what she meant. She looked him in the eyes and asked if he wasn't interested in becoming the king himself one day. Chinedu was surprised by the question. He said yes, of course. The thought of being king had crossed his mind, but he didn't understand how that was even possible. Yemisi smiled and told him to be patient, that soon he would understand. She assured him that everything was under control and that all he had to do was stay quiet and trust her. Though Chinedu still didn't fully understand what Yemisi had in mind, her words stirred something inside him. The idea of becoming king, of having power and control, excited him. Yemisi, meanwhile, was already planning her next move. She had woven herself deep into the lives of both Chinedu and the king. And now, she was on the verge of achieving something far greater than either man could imagine. All she needed was time. And as long as Chinedu remained loyal to her, her plans would soon unfold. Chinedu, though still confused and filled with doubt, agreed to stay quiet. He didn't know exactly what Yemisi was planning, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming, something that would change everything. Some of the villagers, unsettled by the sudden rise of Yemisi and the strange things happening in the village, decided to seek help from the village priest, Baba Ifa. They were afraid of Yemisi, but they knew that Baba Ifa, with his wisdom and connection to the gods, might be able to shed light on who or what she really was. So a group of them gathered their courage and made their way to Baba Ifa's shrine. When they arrived, Baba Ifa, an old man who had served the village for many years, welcomed them with a serious look on his face. He could sense their fear and worry. The villagers explained everything, the strange deaths, the gossip, and how Yemisi was now going to marry the king. They begged Baba Ifa to use his powers to find out the truth about her and help them stop whatever evil she was bringing to their village. But to their shock, Baba Ifa's face darkened. He looked more fearful than they had ever seen him. He told them that he could not reveal anything about Yemisi, not because he didn't know, but because even speaking about her would bring great danger. Baba Ifa trembled as he warned them that Yemisi was no ordinary woman. She was far too powerful, and no one could stop her mission. Not yet, at least. The villagers left the shrine feeling helpless. Even Baba Ifa, the man they thought could save them, was too afraid to do anything. Meanwhile, back in the village, the king went ahead with his plans and married Yemisi. The ceremony was grand, with all the kinsmen and chiefs present. The village was filled with whispers, but no one dared speak out against the king's decision. Yemisi, now queen, had secured her place in the palace, and her influence over the king only grew stronger. Chinedu watched all of this in silence. Though Yemisi had told him to trust her, it still hurt to see the woman he once loved marry the king. As the days went by, he tried to keep a low profile, but not everyone in the village was so kind. One of Chinedu's neighbors, a man named Kelechi, who had never liked him, came to his house just to mock him. Kelechi laughed at Chinedu, calling him a foolish man for allowing the king to take his woman right in front of him. He jeered at Chinedu, saying he should have been more careful instead of trusting someone like Yemisi. Chinedu, filled with anger and shame, listened as Kelechi continued to insult him. The words stung, but deep down, Chinedu knew there was something he could do. He had chosen to believe in Yemisi, and now everything was slipping out of his control. Even though Yemisi had promised him something greater, he could not shake the feeling that he had lost everything. As Kelechi walked away, still laughing at him, Chinedu sat quietly, wondering if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. He couldn't help but think back to when things were simple, before Yemisi came into his life. Now, everything had changed, and he wasn't sure if he was strong enough to face what was coming. Now that Yemisi was queen, her power in the village grew even stronger. She wasted no time in making her influence known. One day, she sent for the very villagers who had gone to see Baba Ifa. They came to the palace, trembling with fear, not knowing why they were called. When they arrived, Yemisi didn't waste any words. She warned them to be careful and told them she knew exactly where they had gone and what they had asked Baba Ifa. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were cold and dangerous. The villagers were shocked. How did she know they had gone to the priest? None of them had spoken a word to anyone. Fear gripped their hearts as they realized just how powerful Yemisi truly was. On their way home, they were silent, too scared to say anything. Once they were out of earshot, they made a vow. They swore never to speak of Yemisi again, not to each other, not to anyone. From that day, they lived in fear, pretending everything was normal, but inside, they knew Yemisi was watching. Meanwhile, Yemisi continued her manipulation of the king. One evening, as they sat together in the royal chambers, she told the king that she had an idea. She suggested that Chinedu, her former husband, be made the head of the palace guards. She praised Chinedu's strength and loyalty, saying he would be perfect for the role. Under her spell, the king did not argue. He agreed without hesitation, trusting Yemisi's judgment completely. The news spread quickly through the village, and many people, especially the elders, were so angry. They couldn't understand why the king would make such a decision, especially when they all knew about Yemisi and Chinedu's past. It didn't sit well with them. The elders gathered and decided to approach the king. They wanted him to rethink his decision, to be cautious about putting Chinedu in such a powerful position. When the elders went to the palace and expressed their concerns, the king was furious. He stood up and warned them to mind their own businesses. He told them that he loved his wife Yemisi and trusted her completely. He didn't care what anyone thought about Chinedu's appointment. The elders, shocked by the king's outburst, had no choice but to live quietly. They were deeply troubled, but there was nothing they could do. The king was blinded by his love for Yemisi, and no one dared to challenge him further. As time passed, it became clear to everyone that Yemisi was the one pulling the strings in the palace. The king did whatever she asked without question, and the villagers grew more fearful of her day by day. The once peaceful village was now a place of whispers, secrets, and fear. No one dared cross Yemisi, and those who tried were either dead or too scared to speak. Chinedu, now the head of the guards, was unsure what to make of his new position. He knew that Yemisi was behind it, but he still didn't fully understand her plans. All he could do was follow along, hoping that whatever she had promised him would one day come true. But deep down, a part of him still wondered if he was being led down a path he couldn't escape. One night, as Chinedu lay in his room, Yemisi appeared at his door. Her eyes glowed with a strange light, and her voice was smooth and commanding. She told Chinedu to follow her to the king's bedroom. Confused, Chinedu asked why. Yemisi smiled and told him that the king was not home, and this was his chance to be closer to her in ways that would bring him more power. "Don't you want to become king?" she whispered. Chinedu looked at her, his mind racing. She explained her plan. If he continued to sleep with her in the king's bed, the king would eventually become sick, and with time, he would die. The king had no children, so when he died, Yemisi would marry Chinedu, making him the new king. Chinedu was excited by the thought of becoming king. A dream he had never imagined could be so close. He accepted Yemisi's plan without hesitation. From that night on, whenever the king was away, Chinedu would sneak into the king's bedroom and sleep with Yemisi. He believed her words, thinking that this was the path to greatness. Days turned into weeks, and soon enough, the king began to fall ill. The sickness seemed to come from nowhere, and the healers in the village were puzzled. No treatment seemed to work, and the king's condition worsened every day. The villagers, unaware of what was happening behind the palace walls, began to worry about the future of the kingdom. After a few months of suffering, the king passed away. The village mourned, but Yemisi wasted no time. She quickly positioned herself as the one in power, declaring herself ruler since the king had left no heir. The villagers, though shocked by her boldness, were too afraid to speak against her. With the king gone, Yemisi's grip on the village became stronger than ever. Chinedu, however, was furious. This was not the plan. He had been promised that he would be king, but now it seemed that Yemisi had no intention of following through. Anger and betrayal burned inside him, and one night he confronted Yemisi. He demanded to know why she had gone back on her word. He wanted to be king just as she had promised. Yemisi, unfazed by his anger, looked at him with a cold smile. Without warning, her body began to change right before Chinedu's eyes. Yemisi transformed into a massive snake, her scales glistening in the dim light. She slithered toward him, her eyes glowing with a deadly light. Chinedu backed away in fear, his heart pounding in his chest. As quickly as she had transformed, Yemisi shifted back into her human form. She stood before Chinedu, calm and powerful. She told him the truth. She was not just a woman, she was a demon sent to destroy the village. All the strange deaths, including his wife, Amaka, had been her doing. She was responsible for the chaos that had taken over the village. Chinedu was frozen in fear. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. Yemisi then warned him, her voice cold and sharp. If he ever tried to tell anyone what she had done or who she truly was, he would join his wife in the grave. Chinedu, shaking with fear, knew that Yemisi was not making idle threat. He was trapped, powerless against her. From that moment on, Chinedu lived in constant fear. He could no longer see a way out. Yemisi, now the ruler of the village, had everything in her control. Her plans had unfolded perfectly, and there was nothing Chinedu could do to stop her. One day, not long after Yemisi had taken full control of the village, a young man arrived at the palace gates. He was dressed simply, with the calm presence of someone who had seen and understood much more than his age suggested. When he was allowed into the palace, he introduced himself as Prince Adebayo, the rightful heir to the throne. Yemisi was shocked. She had always believed that the king had no children, that his line ended with his death. But here was a man claiming to be the king's son. Her mind raced as she tried to process the situation. The elders were immediately called to the palace. Two of them, wise and old, confirmed that Prince Adebayo was indeed the son of the late king. They explained that the former king had kept his son's identity hidden because of the many enemies in the village who had long coveted the throne. By keeping his son's existence a secret, the king had hoped to protect him from harm. Yemisi's face grew dark with anger as the truth unraveled. She had worked so hard, manipulated and schemed her way into power, only to have it all threatened by a prince she had never even known existed. The elders, realizing they had been fooled by Yemisi's lies, immediately stripped her of her position. The village had their true king now, and Yemisi's reign was over. Chinedu stood by, watching everything unfold. He had no word, just a deep sense of dread. He had followed Yemisi's path, thinking it would lead him to power and glory, but now he saw nothing but disaster ahead. The elders made a swift decision. Yemisi and Chinedu were to be sent away, banished from the palace forever. Many villagers, furious with all the chaos Yemisi had caused, demanded that she and Chinedu be sent to the evil forest, a cursed place where no one ever returned. The forest was known for its darkness, where spirits and dangerous creatures roamed freely, and banishment there was a death sentence. The people wanted justice for all the deaths and strange happenings that had plagued the village since Yemisi's arrival. But Prince Adebayo, now the rightful king, stood up and made his first royal decree. Despite everything that had happened, he showed mercy. He told the elders that Yemisi and Chinedu would not be sent to the evil forest. Instead, he ordered that they be pardoned and simply cast out of the palace to live as commoners with no power or influence. Though King Adebayo did not yet know the full extent of Yemisi's evil deeds, his kind heart guided him to spare their lives. The villagers grumbled, unhappy with the decision. They had wanted revenge, but they dared not question the new king. Yemisi and Chinedu, stripped of everything, were led out of the palace. The grandeur, the power, and the wealth they had once enjoyed were gone. Now, they were nothing more than two outcasts left to wander the village they had once ruled over. As they walked away from the palace gates, Yemisi's eyes burned with rage. She had been defeated for now, but deep down, she still harbored her dark powers. Chinedu, on the other hand, was consumed by regret. He had followed Yemisi blindly, and now he had lost everything. The promises she had made to him were all lies, and he had been nothing but a pawn in her twisted game. The village, though relieved that their true king had returned, was still wary. They did not know what Yemisi might do next, but for the moment, they were content to see her and Chinedu removed from the palace. One evening, while Yemisi was out of the house, Chinedu decided it was time to make his escape. The fear and regret had grown too strong for him to ignore any longer. He quietly packed his few belongings, careful not to make a sound. He knew that if Yemisi found out what he was doing, his life would be in danger. Once his things were gathered, Chinedu ran as fast as his leg could carry him, heading for his maternal village, which was far away. He had no plan other than to get as far away from Yemisi as possible. All he wanted was to escape her grasp and start a new life, far from the dark path he had been led down. When Yemisi returned home later that evening, she immediately noticed that something was wrong. The house felt empty. She searched the rooms and found that Chinedu was gone. Her rage boiled over. Chinedu, the one person she thought she could control, had abandoned her. Furious, she stormed out of the palace and made her way straight to the palace. She wasn't going to let anyone take power from her, not even the prince. At the palace, Yemisi attempted to use her usual charm and cunning. She tried to seduce Prince Adebayo, hoping to regain control by manipulating him as she had done with so many before. But the prince was not like the others. He saw through her lies and refused to give in to her. The rejection infuriated Yemisi. She had never been denied what she wanted, and the fact that Adebayo stood firm only made her more determined to take action. In a fit of rage, Yemisi reached into her bag and pulled out a small sinister object, something filled with dark magic. She was about to use it against the new king, intending to destroy him and take back the throne by all means necessary. But before she could cast her evil spell, something powerful hit her from behind, as if the spirits themselves had intervened. Yemisi fell to the ground, her body lifeless. The palace guards and the elders rushed to the scene, shocked by what had just happened. They realized that Yemisi's evil deeds had finally caught up with her. The villagers, who had long feared Yemisi, were relieved to hear that she was no longer a threat. Her body, filled with dark magic and wickedness, was taken to the evil forest. There it was buried deep within the cursed land, where no one would dare go. The village elders, made sure she was placed in the most desolate part of the forest, ensuring that her spirit would never return to haunt the village again. With Yemisi gone, the village could finally breathe easy. King Adebayo ruled with wisdom and fairness, restoring peace and harmony to the land. The people no longer had to live in fear, and slowly, life returned to normal. The strange events that had taken place over the past years became stories that the villagers would pass down from generation to generation. This story teaches that no matter how powerful or cunning someone may be, evil deeds will eventually lead to their downfall. Yemisi's greed for power and her deceitful ways brought harm to many, but in the end, she could not escape the consequences of her actions. Chinedu too learned a hard lesson. Following the wrong path, even when it seems promising, can lead to great regret and loss. It is important to choose wisely and to stay true to one's values, for the pursuit of power and wealth through wickedness will only bring ruin in the end.